So what I'm proposing is that we can be fierce agents of change within this. We can bring back our lives. We can turn on our lives fully. All the places we had our lives on pause, we can consider the energies of our lives turned up full with the fierce urgency of now. And the word fierce, I, of course, looked to my dictionary called Google, and I looked at the definition. The first definition of that adjective is having an intense aggressiveness, powerful, wild, violent, stormy, vicious, untamed, devastating. That's what the universe is doing, right? That's what the conditions are. But if you look on Google for the second definition of ferocity or fierce, it says, showing a heartfelt and powerful intensity. Intense, strong, powerful, relentless, passionate. So I say that is the kind of ferocity that we need to be reacting to the other ferocity with, right? When the storms get heavier, our faith gets stronger. Our oneness, our connection, our community gets stronger. Our divinity, our awareness of who we really are gets called to the forefront. And we know that our God is bigger than any of this ferocity that's happening in the external world. Our God is more fierce in a loving way, and that this love presence, this love power can dissolve and harmonize and synthesize all things back to this symphonic state that we envision. Just recently, it was the anniversary of 9/11, and that reminded me of another fierce urgency of now. So 19 years ago today, you remember what happened, but do you also remember what happened immediately the next day, the same day, the whole week? First responders were not questioning their duty to run towards the devastation, to try to rescue people. We were glued to our TV sets praying for those people trapped underneath the rubble. Do you remember that? And do you remember all of a sudden American flags started appearing everywhere? You stuck one on your car. I remember driving on the freeway days later and seeing American flags on 85 and 280, American flags underneath the overpasses flying everywhere. And it just brought tears to my eyes. The immediate reaction, the instinct that we had because we were scared. Times were uncertain, and we all banded together regardless of color and creed and politics. Do you remember that? It was like the best of us came out of the worst times. And so that uncertainty is happening right now. This is another opportunity for us to grab the intensity of the moment, the intensity of now. And the enemies are more complex today. The challenges maybe are more complex even than they were after 9/11. There's just so many of them coming at us. And so for inspiration for this talk, it began with me looking at someone who provided inspiration in 1967. Martin Luther King, a few years after his I Have a Dream speech, he did another speech in Riverside, California. And I'm going to read a few words from that. He said, "We are now faced with the fact that tomorrow is today. We are confronted with the fierce urgency of now. In this unfolding conundrum of life and history, there is such a thing as being too late. There's no time for apathy or complacency. This is a time for vigorous and positive action. And so I don't think it necessarily means that you have to make your mission changing the world. It can be shifting myself today. You know, I talked on Thursday night about the peace song, let there be peace on earth and let it begin with me, right? So if there's not peace within me, how can there be peace in the world? If there's not friendship and reconciliation and forgiveness within me, how can there be forgiveness in the world? So what are we going to do with this fierce urgency of now that Martin Luther King called us to 53 years ago? Someone else whose life story expresses the fierce urgency of now is someone named Nkosi Johnson. And you may not have heard of him, but there are actually several books and documentaries written about him. He was born in South Africa in 1998, actually 1989, with AIDS, right from the womb. And his birth mother, his natural birth mother, died very soon. And his adopted mother was wonderful. She was just wonderful and gave him so much great care. Normally, a child born with AIDS lives 1 to 2 years. And Nkosi Johnson lived 12 years, the longest of anyone at that time in history who had lived with natal AIDS. And something that happened in his life early on was when he went to grade school, they rejected him. They said, you can't come here, you've got AIDS. So he decided to make his life dedicated to the advocacy to people who have AIDS, expressing, we are human too. We're all the same. Treat us like your brothers and sisters because we are. And so he decided that he had this message to give to the world. And he put so much energy into this that he became the keynote speaker for the International AIDS Conference. And he was only 11 years old at that time. And the message that he shared, the takeaway for me, was what some people call Nkosi's Creed. And it says, do all you can with what you have, in the time that you have, in the place that you are. I'll repeat that. Do all you can with what you have, in the time that you have, in the place that you are. That's the fierce urgency of now. Someone else recently who kind of came into my attention span, I've been watching a lot of videos of his, is Steve Jobs. And Steve Jobs, for all the good and bad, captured the intensity of now in many ways. I'll give you a few examples. When he was first growing Apple, he didn't have the experience to take a large company like Apple to the next step. He needed someone who had a lot of experience in the corporate world. And so he called upon John Scully, who's still alive today. John Scully was the CEO of PepsiCo at that time. And Steve Jobs met with him and looked at him and said, John, do you want to just sell sugar water your whole life? Or do you want to come with me and change the world? And John was convinced at that moment, I'm going to come with you to Apple and change the world. And so he remained the CEO of Apple for 10 years. Steve Jobs, many, many years later, did a commencement speech for Stanford, although he never graduated from college. He was a college dropout. And I believe his most fantastic speech was that speech. And I'll read a couple of lines that remind me of this power of now, this urgency, this of the ferocity of now. He says, your time is limited, so don't waste it on living someone else's life. Don't be trapped by dogma, which is living with the results of other people's thinking. And I thought that was nice because unity does not have a dogma. We have principles, but we remain open, right? We remain, what they say, open at the top. He goes on to say, don't let the noise of others' opinions drown out your own inner voice. And most importantly, have the courage to follow your heart and your intuition. They somehow already know what you truly want to become. Everything else is secondary. I'm going to read this one more time. Your time is limited, so don't waste it on living someone else's life. Don't be trapped by dogma, which is living the results of other people's thinking. Don't let the noise of other people's opinions drown out your own inner voice. And most importantly, have the courage to follow your heart and your intuition. They somehow already know what you truly want to become. Everything else is secondary. To me, that was beautiful. And I can't do a talk on now without talking a little bit about someone who wrote a book called The Power of Now, and that's Eckhart Tolle. And I'm sure many of you who have read that, or The New Earth by Eckhart Tolle. And I was reading different parts, and 4 aspects of that book, 4 quotes from that book stuck out to me the most. I wanted to bring them here to crystallize into this talk today. The first is anxiety, tension, stress, and worry are all forms of fear caused by too much future, not enough presence. Too much future, not enough presence. That reminds me of something that Ram Dass would say, be here now, right? Just be here now. Eckhart Tolle goes on to say, most humans are never fully present in the now because unconsciously they believe that the next moment must be more important than this one. Haven't you felt that before? Just being not quite here in the now because that thing that's coming up is more important in a minute, in 2 minutes, in an hour, in a day, tomorrow, next week. That's more important than what's going on here. And it takes us out of the now. And Eckhart says, but then you miss your whole life, which is never not now. Get it? You miss your whole life. That's never, because your whole life is never not now. That means your whole life is just these series of nows. And he says, that's a revelation to some people, to realize that your life is only ever now. And I'm thinking about this kind of razor thin line. Think of that, this line in front of you that's now. And everything in the past, like how many miles does that take up? How many miles of stuff are you carrying that's behind you in the past? It's not real. It's only real in our current memory. And looking to the future, there is no future. There is only what we imagine in the now. So instead of this razor thin line of now, I think what Eckhart Tolle was describing to do is let's expand this now. Let's rest into this now. Let's trust into this now. Let's be present into this now. That's the part of the reason why we come back to this service each week, is to be in the now of this service, of this sacred community, to remember what's really important is right here, right now, isn't it? So someone else who talked about now was Charles Fillmore, and it's like he could have written The Power of Now. Charles Fillmore said, I refuse to be anxious about tomorrow or even the next minute. And Myrtle Fillmore said something similar. Charles Fillmore also said, right here and now, the great work of character building is to be done, and whoever neglects present opportunities, looking instead to the future, heaven, for better conditions, right, is pulling away from the kingdom of heaven itself. And I'll repeat that again. Right here and now, the great work of character building is to be done, and whoever neglects present opportunities, instead looking forward to a future heaven for better conditions, is pulling right away from the kingdom of heaven itself, which is right here and right now. So my takeaway from all this is simply this. This is David's creed. The past zaps your energy. Worrying about the future zaps your energy. The present moment is the birthplace of all expansiveness and energy. So the more we can be present, the more we can stop worrying about the future, the more we can stop fretting about the past, the more we can let ourselves off the hook for the past, because it does not exist. It does not exist. Only we can recreate ourselves anew. You've heard the saying, let this be the first day of the rest of your life. That is so powerful. And I believe that the founders of Unity always went back to that. Eric Butterfield often wrote about it, and it was Jesus's teaching that there essentially is no karma. All is forgiven. All is forgiven with nothing to forgive. And so we can start anew right now. I'll close by saying I had a walk before the smoke got really bad, and I was listening to these insects in the trees. They didn't go chirp, chirp, chirp. It was just this kind of constant drone, this, you know the ones? It's just this constant drone, and they come out every once in a while. Those are cicadas. And the species of cicada that is called a periodical cicada comes out once every 13 to 17 years, depending upon the subspecies. What happens before that is 17 years of the cicada living underground in the nymph state, in the infant state, right? 17 years. And the whole group of cicadas together knows when to come out together and come into adulthood. And when they come into adulthood, they sing, literally in groups that the scientists call cicada choruses. Isn't that beautiful? They're singing in these choruses. And their adult lifespan is only a few weeks. But they sing. They sing. If they've got to have emotions, right? They're not just these empty chemical bags. They are creatures. I don't think we often give creatures enough credit for having souls and emotions, but they must be happy. And I would say that they're probably not fretting about the 17 years that happened before that of their dysfunctional childhood, right? Because they've only got a few weeks to live. So what do? They sing and they find a mate, and that's their joyous adult life that lasts 3 to 4 weeks. So the cicadas know about the power of now. What can we learn about the fierce urgency of now from Steve Jobs, from Martin Luther King, from Eckhart Tolle, from Nkosi Johnson? What can we learn, and what can we take into our own philosophy? Let's pray. Let today be the first day of the rest of my life. There is no past. There is no future right now. There's only this expansive present moment. And in that expansive present moment, I can be at peace. I can be at harmony with myself. I can be at harmony with all things. Within that present moment, I can let social justice happen now, equality happen now. I can let happiness happen now as a decision. I can let peace happen now, letting it begin with me. I know that I must do all I can with what I have, in the time that I have, in the place that I am. And so it is.